Hello everybody and a warm welcome to the channel. So last few weeks I spent playing extensively with tier 3 main battle tanks, and today I'll be taking a closer look at them. I will give you my short overview, my pros and cons of each of these vehicles, and try to rank them from worst to best in my opinion. There are in total 7 of main battle tanks in tier 3, but in this video I'll be focusing on top 5 of them. In the list itself I did not put the French MX-50 because I think with a horrendous loading time of 16 seconds it's just not worth my time. Also, one other vehicle that did not make it on the list is the Chinese Type 79. This main battle tank is way too similar to the Soviet T-62 and Israeli T-6, but just worse than these two, and in my opinion doesn't deserve to be in the top 5. Again, this is only my opinion, and of course it may be different than your opinion and experience, so feel free to disagree with me in the comments section. And let's begin with the list. So at number 5, the bottom of my list, is the American main battle tank M60 Patton. M60 is the continuation of the previous model M48 and unfortunately bears all the flaws that we saw previously with M48. It's a very big, cumbersome tank, slow to get to full speed with a very bad acceleration, and you'll notice also when you finally get it to full speed, it is very bad experience, very hard to turn the corners with M60. Regarding armor, it is, I would say, below average for a tier 3 main battle tank. Sure, the turret has a decent 190mm of armor up front on paper, so theoretically you can use this vehicle for hull down positions. But this 190mm is just not good enough when facing anything from tier 3 above. Even some of the tier 2 vehicles will have no issue penetrating you straight in the face. The main gun has a decent penetration but lacks in damage department. On the plus side, the gun depression is very good, so as I mentioned earlier you can use it for hull down positions behind sloped hills and ridges, but I repeat again, just be careful because your armor is not as strong as it looks on paper. Like most of the American tanks, also M60 can use hash rounds, which are suited to penetrate a thick and sloped armor, but these rounds are often found to be somewhat too random. They can do very good in certain situations, but then again they can also be bouncy as hell, so I rather prefer heat ones as more reliable. All in all, M60 is better choice than the French and Chinese main battle tanks of this tier, but for me it was just an obstacle to get to better American tanks in higher tiers, and I can't recommend playing with M60 for longer periods. Next on my list at number 4 is the German Leopard 1 main battle tank. Unlike German late World War II era tanks like for example Tiger 1 and Tiger 2, who are all about armor and gun, Leopard 1 is a different beast. It's all about gun and speed with this vehicle. Biggest problem I have with Leopard 1 is that it plays more like a light tank than a proper main battle tank. Your armor with the Leopard 1 is laughable at best, I would say. It can be penetrated by almost anything on the battlefield. On the other hand, where it lacks in armor, a Leopard makes it up with the best speed and acceleration of all of tier 3 main battle tanks. For example, after coming to this tank after playing M60, you will feel like you're flying around the battlefield. Leopard also has a great gun with excellent penetration of 370mm. That is, for example, 100 more millimeters than the Soviet T-62 and Israeli T-6. Your best option with Leopard 1 is to stay hidden and stealthy as long as possible, being sort of a sniper and using your great gun from distance and using your speed to traverse the battlefield quickly. Be sort of a flanker and supporter of your team from the sides and back areas, because in direct head-on engagements, unfortunately Leopard doesn't stand a chance. Again, my biggest problem with Leopard is that it does not feel like a proper main battle tank, but rather some version of a light tank, and that is why I can't put it any higher on my list. On the other hand, if you prefer this Leopard's playstyle, feel free to put it few places higher. And we come to number 3 of my list. At number 3 we have the British main battle tank Chieftain Mark II. If my memory serves me correctly, earlier in Armored Warfare, Chieftain Mark II was in tier 4, but then it got nerfed to tier 3. Correct me if I'm wrong, I might be wrong on this one. This tank also shares some similar flaws with M60, but then again excels in some other areas that makes it a much better choice than the M60. It is by far the heaviest of all Tier 3 main battle tanks. For example, it is almost 20 tons heavier than a Soviet T-62. And as you can imagine, it is very hard to maneuver and get to top speed with this vehicle. If you think, for example, M60 is somewhat slow and cumbersome, wait till you try the Chieftain Mark II. Acceleration is just horrendous, but although top speed is a decent one once you get the tank going, but good luck in get the tank going. On the other side, it has a great armor for a Tier 3 tank, best of all Tier 3 main battle tanks. And interesting is that the hull with 300mm of armor up front is more armored than a turret who has around 240mm up front. The gun is also much better than the one, for example, on M60 with great gun depression, best of all Tier 3 main battle tanks, so Chieftain is ideal to play behind ridges and hills, although you often don't need to implement this strategy since, as I said earlier, your hull is more armored than your turret. Unfortunately, you can't use heat rounds with Chieftain, only armored piercing ones and cash rounds. One other problem I have with Chieftain is that it's a very big tank and hard to hide on the battlefield, so you will depend heavily on your teammates to scout the enemy in front of you. So, all in all, with Chieftain you get a very slow, cumbersome vehicle, but with very good gun and great armor. For me, lack of mobility and heat rounds puts it only on third place. And we come to second place on my list. The number 2 is the Soviet T-62 main battle tank. This tank is the continuation of the Soviet design that started with T-55, with of course some upgrades. If you compare T-62 with other Tier 3 main battle tanks, you will find out that there are tanks with better guns than the one on T-62, tanks with better armor, better speed, but as an overall experience and all-around main battle tank, I think that T-62 functions perfectly. It is a very mobile tank with good speed and acceleration. It has a very good sloped armor, especially on the turret who has 240mm up front and can bounce a lot of shots if positioned right. Gun also has a decent penetration and deals a great deal of damage. Only drawback with the gun, it is a very bad depression of -6 degrees, so you can't use this tank very good to peek and boom tactics behind the ridges and hills. When facing Tier 2 and Tier 3 vehicles in the game, you can easily dominate the battlefield with T-62. Although I must say it will struggle when facing higher tiers where your armor becomes less bouncy and less reliable. All in all, I think T-62 is your typical main battle tank. Doesn't have any super powerful trait, but also doesn't have any major flaws like some previous main battle tanks, and I had really a great experience, great fun playing with T-62. And finally we come at the top of my list. The first place goes to the Israeli Tiran 6 main battle tank. This tank is basically the Israeli version of T-62. What happened was that during the Israeli-Arab conflict, the Israeli army managed to capture some of the Soviet T-62 tanks and then did some modifications on them and designated them Tiran 6. So everything is almost the same as in T-62, the gun, mobility. Only in the armor department things are slightly different, since Tiran 6 is one of the first tanks in the game to use the explosive reactive armor ERA that is designed to counter heat rounds. So everything I said previously about T-62 applies on Tiran as well. Great speed, great maneuverability, good gun, so great all-arounder. And I give him a slight edge here because of this ERA armor that prolongs its survivability on the battlefield. Differences are so minor between Tiran 6 and T-62 that in the end it just comes to what tech tree do you want to invest your time in. If you want to, of course, go to the more powerful Israeli tanks, you will start and you will choose Tiran 6. If you want, of course, to continue with the Soviet line, you will go with T-62. So this was my short overview and ranking of Tier 3 main battle tanks. Of course, I would love to hear your thoughts and your experience with these vehicles. I hope you liked the video and found it informative and interesting. If you did, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. In my next video I'll try to do the same ranking of armored fighting vehicles of tier 3, so stay tuned for that one. Thank you very much for watching this video, and until next time, take care and goodbye.